What rides should you ride at Cedar Point, and when should you ride them? Well, today, that's what we're going to talk about. I hope you're ready. I hope you're excited. A tier list is coming your way, and let's go. All right, now today we are talking every different ride at Cedar Point, literally every single ride at Cedar Point. And we're talking about when it is easiest to get onto each of these rides. When do the lines populate and when do they kind of go down a little bit? That's what we're talking about, so you can make the most of every single second while you are at the park at Cedar Point. Also, this channel is dedicated to helping you get the most out of your day at theme parks, especially at Cedar Point and Kings Island in particular, but other parks also, and giving you as much information as possible. So I hope that you will come and join us. Press that subscribe button, like button, especially if you see things that you'd like in this video today. Also, I apologize for my voice. I am still getting over whatever kind of horrendous hellfire cold was happening this winter that's kind of lasted for like 2 weeks here. So I'm also sorry some of my content has not been so great. I've not been feeling well, so I haven't been releasing as much, but we are going to get back into this today with this tier list. I hope you're ready, and let's get into this right now. Now, this tier list is going to rank every single ride at Cedar Point into 5 different options. At the very bottom, we have walk-ons. The next one up is small lines. The next one up is lines in afternoon. So only in the afternoon, it gets longer lines. The second to last one is lines all morning and then less at night. And then the S tier of attractions is huge lines all day long. We're going to be dividing these into those sections because this can help you to figure out what rides are best to hit when. If you're coming into the park shortly after opening, you might want to go to the lines all morning, less at night rides, because those are going to have fewer lines at that point. Or even better, you might want to go to lines in the afternoon, because those rides are going to have lines in the afternoon, but they're going to get lines a lot later than some of the other rides. So we're going to talk about all these rides today, and I'm going to give you little caveats on each one of these coasters and rides that you can have at Cedar Point. So let's get into this. Now, the very first ride that we're going to be talking about is 4x4s. Some of these are not going to be bangers. 4x4s is a kid's ride, and it is almost always a walk-on. By the way, when I am considering something a walk-on at this point, a walk-on is never going to be something that literally, or rarely is it going to be something that literally has a walk-on. It's usually going to mean that one rotation and you can get right on. That's basically what this ride is. Next ride is the Atomic Scrambler. Once again, one wait, and that's all you're going to have to do. So once again, we're going to call that a walk-on. Next is the Balloon Race. Again, it's another kids ride. And a lot of these kids rides are going to be walk-ons, to be honest. But we're going to include it anyway, one way or another. Now we get to our first coaster, Blue Streak. Blue Streak is going to be a ride that gets lines a little bit later on in the day. It's not going to ever be people's biggest priority. You might have a few kids who it's their favorite ride, or you might even have a few adults who it's their favorite ride, but it's not going to be mostly for the majority of people. So usually people are not going to rush to get to Blue Streak, so we're going to say lines in afternoon. Breakaway Bay is a wave pool at Cedar Point in the water park. And yes, we are talking water parks today. Also, just a little bit, there were a few that I didn't include, especially with the slides, because I'm really just not a slide guy. But either way, that's a walk-on. Of course, you can walk right in no matter what. The CP and LE Railroad at Cedar Point is, again, a walk-on. It's one rotation that you're going to have to wait almost always, save maybe the most busy of days. You know what? Because of the most busy of days, we're going to include it in small lines instead. That one can sometimes have a decent line, but never anything that's too ridiculous. The next ride is Cadillac Cars, and Cadillac Cars almost never has a line, but usually you do have to wait at least for a car or two. So I can't really say it's just one rotation. So we're going to include that in small lines also. Calypso is almost always one rotation. I've rarely seen it with more than that. So walk on for Calypso. The Camp Bus, walk on, absolutely. And again, a kid's ride, it's one that's hard to not have it be that. Next, we have Cedar Creek, which is a lazy river and almost always a walk-on, but I'm going to include it in small lines because I have seen some crazy lines for it, actually. Anything in the water park is usually going to have smaller lines, especially when it comes to these larger experiences like a lazy river or like the wave pool. But there were some ridiculous times this last year that really made me question that. Now, of course, the slides at Cedar Point Shores can sometimes be more than what you would expect them to be. And that's because some of those lines can be pretty big because they are very popular things for those water slides. So do prepare for longer waits for water slides. I don't know them as much, at least not most of them. So I'm only talking about the ones I've actually experienced, and I haven't experienced those as often, but I do know they get some pretty big lines. Usually they would be more along the lines of lines all morning, less at night, because as the park closes, the lines dwindle down. Our next ride is Cedar Creek Mine Ride, and Cedar Creek Mine Ride is going to be, do I say small lines or lines in the afternoon? You know what, I'm gonna say small lines. It is usually pretty small, and it can sometimes have still relatively small lines in the afternoon too, so, or after the afternoon also. So we're gonna, yeah, I think that's fair. Next is Cedar Downs. Cedar Downs is an incredibly high capacity ride, and that's to your advantage because that is, by the consideration of this panel, a walk-on, because usually it is only a one rotation before you can get onto it, as long as you play your cards right. Next, we have Cedar Point Beach. The Cedar Point Beach, of course, is just a walk-on, but I have to include it in attractions. It is one of the most important things I think you can do when you go visit Cedar Point, because Cedar Point was built on its beach. If it didn't have its beach, it wouldn't be nearly the destination that it is today. And it wouldn't be the destination that it is today without the beach, regardless of whether it had it before or now. It is just a part of Cedar Point's DNA, and it's something everyone should go visit. But of course, and part of the reason why it's fun to go visit is because there is never a line for it. So take advantage of that. Next, we have Charlie Brown's Wind Up. Again, rarely are you going to wait more than one rotation for that. Most kids just can't deal with waiting more than one rotation, so they usually don't. If it's more than that, they're usually not going to wait in it. They're going to go do something else, which means those lines remain pretty small, almost always, regardless of how popular the park is that day. Next is the Coliseum Arcade, and the Coliseum Arcade is a walk-on, of course. It is not a free attraction, though, even with your park ticket. It is something that's going to cost you to go visit, unless you have some special things. My friends Drew and Yoko had attractions throughout the year this last year that they could do with it, and that, I think, is a pretty worthwhile kind of a thing. Next, we have Corkscrew. Corkscrew is usually not that bad of a line, but it does get some pretty long lines, surprisingly. We're going to call this a lines in the afternoon situation. It usually does not get lines until the afternoon, but there are times when it gets upwards of 45 minutes for this horrendous ride. I love the ride. I love it for its history. It was one of the biggest rides at the time that was made and had the most loops at the time that was made. So seeing that, I think it's really fun for its history, but it beats the hell out of you. And so I am not a big fan of Corkscrew. Our next ride is Dodgem. Dodgem usually doesn't have that much of a line, but I am going to put it into small lines because every once in a while you got to wait more than one rotation in order to get into it, and it really can get pretty busy there on the boardwalk. Next we have the Dune Buggies, same situation, kids ride, and this is one of the most basic kids attractions. They have the same kind of thing, I think, at every theme park and amusement park and carnival around the country, but it's still a very popular thing, but usually you can get in for a walk-on. There's also a whole bunch of varieties of this exact same ride, and we'll see a lot of those today. Next is Flying Ace Balloon Chase, or Balloon Race, I think might be. And again, we're going for the walk-on with this one. Next, we have Fort Sandusky Mining Company. Once again, walk-on. Now, this is an extra experience, though. It is something that's going to cost you a little bit more. And I've never done it here, but I have done it at Michigan's Adventure, and it is a really fun thing to do. My daughter really enjoyed it. She was there with another friend of hers from along for the ride, actually. So it was definitely a really fun experience to do, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best thing ever, but definitely a fun thing for kids. Next, we have the Funway Arcade. The Funway Arcade is great. Again, a walk-on, but also it is, again, an extra cost for you to do, but that's also where the extra like mirror maze is and stuff like that, and it's stuff that my daughter has really enjoyed. Definitely worthwhile to go check out. Now we have Gatekeeper also. Gatekeeper is a definitely a lines in the afternoon kind of a situation. Usually people look over it in the mornings. I think a lot of times it's because people who are not familiar with Cedar Point do not really realize that Gatekeeper is there. That being said, because of early park entry, sometimes it can get some longer lines in the mornings due to early park entry. But even then, usually it doesn't back up too much until after lunch. So I'm going to keep it with that lines in the afternoon. Next, we have Gemini. Once again, the perfect situation for lines in the afternoon. Gemini never gets really big lines in the mornings at all. However, in the afternoons, sometimes it does. So it's a great filler attraction to hit in the mornings before lunch or even before maybe 2 o'clock, so that you can fill in some extra things. If everything, if let's say it's a very popular day and everything already has long lines, Gemini is a good one to get into. Next, we have Giant Wheel, and this may seem weird to you, but I'm going to put it in huge lines all day. This line is the most ridiculous thing I've ever stood in line for, so much so that it makes it so that I kind of want to never ride that ride ever again for any reason unless I have a fast lane. And even if I have a fast lane, I don't want to ride it because it still sucks up at least a half hour of your time, and that's just a lot of time wasted in the park that I could be doing other stuff. It's great for great views of the park, but I guess if I'd have to really get great views, I'd almost rather do Windseeker rather than that. Although I can film from this a lot of times, where I cannot film from Windseeker ever, no matter what. Next, we have the Glass Blowing Studio. The Glass Blowing Studio you never have a wait for. It is a show, essentially, and you all know that I love shows. And it's also a walk-on, so you never have to wait for it, making it a very worthwhile thing for me. Next, we have the Great Lakes Cove. Once again, it's in the water park. It's kind of a kid's attraction. Both of those are perfect to end up with walk-ons. That's something you never really have to wait for at all. Next, we have the helicopters. Once again, a walk-on. The same kind of kids ride situation that we have going on there. Next, we have Iron Dragon. Iron Dragon will get lines in the afternoon, but as far as coasters go, I'm actually going to say it's usually a small line. Now, the caveat with Iron Dragon is if it does not have 3 trains and instead it has 2, or God forbid 1, you're going to wait much, much longer. If there's 3 trains, then even having the line be completely full or even spilling out a little bit isn't that terrible at all, because That queue is a very, very, very short queue. So you can get through it real fast, probably within a half hour at the very most. However, if there's only 2 trains that are running at that point, then you're gonna have to wait a lot longer. That'll more than double your wait. So that's where the caveat really hits. Make sure that you're looking for those 3 trains rather than 2. Otherwise, those lines are gonna get a lot longer. Joe Cool's Dodgem School. Once again, we got to walk on here. That is a kids attraction, and it is only for kids. You might have to wait a little bit more every once in a while, but it's never going to be too terrible. Kiddie Kingdom Carousel. Now, the Kiddie Kingdom Carousel, actually, it's one of the oldest attractions at Cedar Point. As a matter of fact, it might be the oldest, but it's one of the 3 oldest at Cedar Point. It's a very fun ride. It's much like the Midway Carousel. It's a great place to go, but I wouldn't say that it's anything too particularly special. You might have to wait every once in a while, a little bit more than a walk-on, but I'm going to consider it a walk-on for our purposes. Kite Eating Tree, it's going to be exactly the same. My daughter has gotten onto Kite Eating Tree, gotten off it, and gotten right back on over and over and over and over again in the past. It's a ride that she loved as a kid. And so you usually do not need to wait for that one. Next is Lake Erie Eagles. We're going to put this in the small lines category. Sometimes you do have to wait a little bit and more than 1 or 2 rotations sometimes, which is pretty annoying. Plus, they also have to go through, and because it's technically a kid's ride, they have to manually unbuckle every single person that is in that ride, no matter who they are. That is also a very tedious part of the process. Lemmy's Lagoon. Again, don't have to wait for it, but it is such a fun place to go with your kids. Definitely worthwhile. It also has some smaller slides that you can do with your kids. Definitely really, really fun. The lily pad at the water park, definitely fun. Again, my daughter still loves it, and she's quite good at it, honestly. I am absolutely horrible at it. But again, not really any line for it. You might have to wait a few people as they go right in front of you, but you get on it within just a couple of minutes at most. Definitely worthwhile and definitely very fun. Next, we have Linus Beatlebugs. Linus Beatlebugs often does actually have a pretty decent line. And we're going to say with that one, that has lines in the afternoon. It is a kid's ride, but because it's more than a kid's ride, it's more of your traditional tilt-a-whirl. You also have a lot of adults and teenagers who want to ride that ride often too. Next, we have Magnum. Magnum is the poster child for lines in afternoon. This is the ride that I think of when I think of this category just altogether. It is a very fun ride, and obviously, it's a huge part of Cedar Point's skyline. It's a huge part of the Coaster Wars. It's kind of the ride that, if not began the Coaster Wars, then definitely escalated the Coaster Wars. It is a quintessential ride of Cedar Point's, and one that most people would know about. But it really doesn't get lines until about 1 o'clock, maybe even 2 o'clock at Cedar Point, because it's overshadowed by so many other massive and fantastic rides. Millennium Force, Top Thrill Dragster, or Top Thrill 2 now, Steel Vengeance, Maverick, all these rides overshadow that ride. And so because of that, it becomes a lot less popular to hit. So it's not one that people are running to at the very beginning of the day, at least not most people. You might have a few fanboys that run to it right away, coasters. But it is a ride that most people aren't going to run to right away. So you have a little bit of leeway with it. So if you're coming in a little bit earlier on in the day, but you're not coming in at park opening, that's a great ride to make your very first ride, because you can probably hit it at 11 o'clock with no line whatsoever. But if you wait until 3 o'clock, you're going to have massive lines. Next ride is Matterhorn, and Matterhorn is always going to have a smaller line. I'm not going to say you're going to get in one rotation because often you do not. So you're going to have to wait just a little bit for that one almost all the time. Maverick. Now this ride has huge lines all day long. No matter what, you're always going to find some massive lines for Maverick, even toward the very end of the day, which is a caveat that I'm going to explain later because there are a couple rides that you would not think have lose steam at the end of the day that definitely do lose steam at the end of the day, and you can take advantage of that. Max Air, we're going to say, is lines in afternoon. It is a ride that is a little bit more overlooked. It's not usually one that people are going to flock to right away, but as the park lines everywhere else get big, then that one's going to get bigger also, because people are going to go to that because it has a smaller line than, let's say, Gatekeeper would. Next, we have the Midway Carousel. The Midway Carousel is usually going to be along the lines of that small line situation. You might have to wait a couple of rotations. You're never going to have to wait anything that's too ridiculous, though. Next is Millennium Force. Millennium Force is actually an early park entry ride even, which makes this a huge lines all day situation. Millennium Force has stood the test of time for over 20 years to become a very, very popular ride, and it just never seems to lose steam. It almost always has an hour wait, at least, maybe 45 minutes, but you're always going to have to wait a pretty decent amount of time to ride that ride. Now, the next ride is Monster. Monster has horrible lines, actually, and because of that, I'm going to put huge lines all day. Now, usually, if you have a flat ride in huge lines all day, it's because it is a slow loading ride, and that's exactly what this one is. It's not so much that the line is going to be huge, it's that the loading process is just ridiculous. It's not worth it to wait in. I do every once in a while, especially for my daughter. She really likes it, but it is not one that I look forward to waiting in because it's just longer than it needs to be. Next, we have the motorcycles, and that's going to go into walk-ons. Next, we have the Mustangs, and that's going to go into walk-ons. Then we have Ocean Motion. You know what? I'm going to include Ocean Motion in walk-ons too. You know what? Sometimes on the biggest days it's not. I'm going to include it in small lines instead. I think that's fair. Next, we have the Peanuts 500, which once again almost never has more than a walk-on line. Peanuts characters meet and greet, once again, no line for that. It is very worthwhile though. I always love it when I get to meet Lucy and Charlie Brown and Snoopy and the gang. They're so much fun to talk to, and you can humor them a little bit. You can ask them some questions. I always like to ask them, can they teach me a dance move? It's just something simple and easy to do with them, and they're always a little bit silly with it. So it's definitely fun to have some fun with those characters and just pretend like you're in their world for a little bit. It's definitely a fun thing to do. Next, we have the Peanuts Road Rally. Then we have Pipe Scream. Pipe Scream is one of those rides that's going to have some big lines. But we're going to put it into lines in the afternoon. It's not a particularly popular ride, especially not in the mornings. In the mornings, you could almost hit it almost every time as a great walk-on. But in the afternoons, you're going to have some massive lines. Again, a very, very slow loading line. Police cars, walk-on. Pony rides, walk-on. Now, that being said, pony rides, again, are an extra cost. So there's a reason why it's walk-on, but I have never seen a line for it. Power Tower. I'm actually going to say that Power Tower is a lines in the afternoon situation. Again, it's one that dominates the skyline, but it's also one that's not the most popular. and that's what we're going to have to do with it. Raptor, however, is the quintessential ride for lines all morning, less at night. This ride is so popular in the mornings. People walk into the park and they look up as soon as they walk in and they go, there's a green thing and there's the entrance for it. And they walk straight to the entrance for it, not knowing that there are other rides that they should definitely prioritize instead of Raptor. Because of that, you end up with Raptor having massive lines in the morning, and then somewhere around maybe 3 o'clock, those lines just dwindle down after everyone has stopped entering the park and coming in and just going straight for Raptor and doing the day in the most inefficient way because they're not smart like you and planning by watching videos about Cedar Point. So instead, they're just flying by the seat of their pants with very little planning. And so then you get into Raptor later on at like 3 or 4 o'clock, and you find a line that is almost non-existent because all of those people who came in earlier are now at the back of the park waiting for Maverick and Steel Vengeance when they should have done that at the beginning of the day and flip-flopped and done Raptor at the end of the day. So instead, Raptor is a great one to hit at the end of the day. Next, we have Red Baron. Red Baron again, walk on, kids coaster, or kids ride anyway. Rock, spin, and turn, walk on. Roto Whip, walk on. Rougarou. Ooh, this one. Yeah, you know what? We're going to include this in lines all morning, less at night. This ride, if I'm completely honest, usually doesn't have much of a line at all, but it will randomly pop up and have a different line. It's a little bit different than Raptor in that Raptor is so easily seen from the very front of the park as you walk in. But as you walk around and you go to Millennium Force, you're going to see Rougarou, and then you kind of go, maybe we should hit that. So you'll see as a lot of those same people are walking around the park, all of a sudden Rougarou will get this long line. And then that long line will dissipate and it'll be gone for the rest of the day. And I believe that's just a whole bunch of people who are brand new to Cedar Point, which happens every single day at Cedar Point, coming in, they didn't do their planning, and they went, well, hey, there's a big thing, let's ride that big thing. And then they rode Rougarou. So riding Rougarou throughout the day, if you see a 45-minute wait for it, don't ride it. Also, make sure that you look into the queue because sometimes it says 45 minutes, but it's not 45 minutes. It's much, much shorter than that. And check out my videos for you to actually see me do that. You'll see me actually look through some carnival attractions and I'll look into Rougarou and be like, oh, that's a line I gotta hit. We'll hit that one right now. So you'll see me do that kind of stuff in action, and it'll help you out with your day by checking out my videos if you want to do that. So press the subscribe button, like button, all that kind of stuff before we get done with this video. Next ride that we have is Runaway Rapids. Again, this is a lazy river, but lazy rivers still do get some long lines. So and we'll add it to our small lines. Our next ride is Siren's Curse. And I have no idea what Siren's Curse is going to be like because obviously it's not out yet. It is slated to be out in like middle of the summer kind of a situation. So I'm thinking probably around June it's going to be out, maybe late June. We are going to put it in huge lines all day. I can't imagine that Cedar Point is going to have a brand new ride and it not be incredibly popular, but we'll just have to see what actually happens with it. It has a lot of competition. I mean, between Millennium Force, Steel Vengeance, Maverick, Valraven, and TT2, that's going to be an incredibly popular ride that also may not be so popular because it has so much competition for it. That is something about Cedar Point. Is Cedar Point has so many bangers that often what would be considered a banger at another park, like Gatekeeper, would be like most theme parks, just like biggest star of a ride. But instead, it's a ride that you kind of overlook a little bit, and it's not one of the most popular rides ever. So, like, I have it in Lines in the Afternoon. It's not that popular. It's in my, like, B tier. So because of that, we'll have to see what really happens with Siren's Curse and or with the rides that are around it. Next, we have Skyfighters, Never Await, Walk On. Now, we do have Skyride, and this one's kind of a weird one. I'm going to put it in small lines. However, sometimes it seems like those lines are bigger than small. And that's because that ride moves very, very quickly. It's very efficient. So sometimes the line spills way out into the midway, but that line still won't take more than maybe 10 minutes for you to get all the way up to the front. So you're not going to have to wait a horrible amount of time, and it is a good way to save you some steps walking up and down that midway. Next, we have Skyhawk, and Skyhawk I am going to put solidly into Lines in the Afternoon. Again, it's not one that most people are going to run to in the morning, but it is a ride that's going to be pretty popular in the afternoon after that early rush of everyone going where they need to go. Next, we have Snoopy Seep D. I'm going to leave that one in. Next, we have Snoopy's Deep Sea Divers. I can't say that one. And that's going to go into walk-ons. Next, we also have Snoopy's Express Railroad. Again, same thing. Down into that walk-on. Snoopy's Space Race. Down into that walk-on. We have Space Age. That's going into walk-on too. Splash H2O. Again, walk-on. But I do want to explain that one a little bit. That is a vertical water park. And it really does seem fun. I've run through it before. It's a great way to get wet. But be aware, you're also going to probably get some water up your nose and in your eyes. And it's unpredictable. Let's just say that. Where the water's coming from is very unpredictable. Next, we have Steel Vengeance. Now, I don't know if you'll remember that I said, remember, that there is going to be a caveat on lines getting long lines or not, or having long lines all day. We have Maverick that has long lines all day, all the way until close. And I believe that's because people can see in to where the actual queue is. So they just continue waiting in there. As the line dwindles, they come in and they join a little bit more. Steel Vengeance's queue goes down to nothing at the very end of the night. So my very favorite trick to do is to hit Steel Vengeance at the very end of the night. Now, you are using a little bit of strategy, and you're also taking a little bit of a risk in doing that. Because if that ride closes down, then it is possible that the ride you came to Cedar Point for, which may be Steel Vengeance, may be closed at the end of the night when you are wanting to ride it. If it has had technical difficulties or whatever may have happened, that could be a thing that could cause a problem. So just with a grain of salt, know that that could be a problem. And but one of the best strategies that I think you can do is to save your time doing other things that have longer lines and hit Steel Vengeance at the very end of the night rather than hitting it during the day when it has an hour and a half of a line. Next, we have Storm Surge. This thing has a massive line. I'm going to say lines all morning, less at night. By night in the water park, I'm really talking about 6 o'clock. It's going to have much lower line, but this thing keeps lines pretty much all day long. So expect massive lines if you're wanting to wait at that time, at any time during the day, rather than at the very last minute you may be able to get some lower lines at the very last minute while the water park is still open. The Super Himalaya is going to be a small line situation. It usually doesn't have that long of a line, but it can gain a decent line from time to time. The Barnyard is definitely a walk-on. You can walk in and see the animals whenever you might like. The Sandlot is also a walk-on, but did you know you can go play volleyball at Cedar Point? If you bring a volleyball in your little bag, there's stuff to do right there. There's actually nets that you can use. You can just sit there in the sand and have some fun, and definitely a cool way to spend your evening or your afternoon if you would like to. Thunder Canyon is Cedar Point's last remaining water ride for right now anyway. I hope they replace their other water ride with another like water coaster, but we'll see what happens. It is almost never much of a line. At least over the last several years, it's been almost never much of a line. But I'm going to say it's lines in the afternoon. Next, we have Top Thrill 2, and you can guess exactly where that's going to go. It was not open at all last year, which I think is actually going to make it have even bigger lines this year than last year. It is going to have huge lines all day. I can almost guarantee it. Next, we have Troika, and Troika is gonna have, I think I'm gonna have to say lines in afternoon, definitely. Next, we have Valraven. Valraven, I think, is going to be the casualty of the new coaster, Siren's Curse. So, not because it's been the case yet, but because I'm predicting the case. I think that Valraven is going to have lines all morning, and then it's going to have less at night. I think it's going to be a very similar situation to Raptor at this point, with people feeling like they have to get on it as soon as possible because it is a very popular ride. And then they're going to realize that it has lower lines at the end of the night. Now, we'll see if that actually happens or not. This is just my prediction. At this point, I would say, based off of last year, it was definitely huge lines all day. But my prediction for this year is lines all morning and less at night. We'll see what happens with that. And like I said, follow me and you'll find more about that. Also, if you'd like to, press that membership button. There's a join button down below. Go press that button. And for $1, I don't know, $2? I think it's $2. You can see every single video that I have finished. Whenever I get them finished, I immediately press for them to go straight to memberships. So sometimes I can't release them immediately, and you'll be able to find those videos immediately then. Know every single thing up to date, up to the minute that I have released. And you can see those videos as quickly as you want. Plus, we also do other fun things, including like polls and special videos I make for you guys inside the park. So go check that out if you'd like to. You also get fun little things too, like special emojis, and you get a little logo right next to your name. I have a little logo of my face next to everyone's name, and it changes colors depending on how long you've been here. So if you ever see someone with one of those, tell them thank you for supporting this channel. Also, that's exactly what it does. When you press those membership buttons, you support this channel, you help me buy tickets, you help fund this venture, which is not a cheap venture to do, but I hope you guys appreciate it, and I love doing it. Now, next is the Watering Hole, and the Watering Hole, again, is a walk-on. Wave Swinger. Wave Swinger is usually going to be a walk-on. Rarely, I've seen it a little bit more than that, but for this purpose, I'm going to say it's a walk-on. Next, we have Wild Mouse. Wild Mouse is one of those lines in the morning, less at night situations. It's not an incredibly popular ride, and it's not that great of a ride also, if I'm completely honest. It hurts. It doesn't make me feel good at the end of it. I'm not getting off that ride and going, yay! I'm getting off that ride and going, oh. Not my favorite ride. Next one is Wilderness Run. Wilderness Run is a kid's ride. It is a very popular ride because it's slow loading. But I'm going to say it gets lines in the afternoon. Yeah. Next, we have Windseeker. Windseeker, again, is another one of those lines in the afternoon situations. It's just not one that people are going to run to, but it is one that as the day wears on, they're going to want to hit eventually. Next, we have Woodstock Express. Woodstock Express, again, I think is going to be a lines in the afternoon situation. A lot of times, even families with kids, they don't want to wake up for early park entry. They want to come a little bit later. They're not even going to wake up to get there by 10 o'clock. They're going to wake up, probably have lunch at McDonald's so that's a little bit cheaper because their kids are just going to eat chicken nuggets anyway, and they don't want to spend $16 for chicken nuggets in the park. And then they're going to come into the park at 1 o'clock, and at that point, that's when the kids' attractions are going to get a little bit more steam. Next, we have Woodstock's Airmail. We're going to consider that a walk-on. That's a pretty easy one to hit if you're wanting to. It's very similar to the Kite Eating Tree. And then lastly, we have Woodstock's Whirly Birds. It is Whirly Birds. And again, we're going to put that into walk-ons. So the idea with this tier list just all together is to try to hit these rides when they are not popular. My favorite example of that would be going to Raptor. Make sure that you hit Raptor when it is less popular. Since it's popular in the morning and it has lines in the morning, but it has less lines at night, then hit that ride at night. If it has lots of lines in the afternoon, then try to hit it earlier on in the morning when it's not so popular. And you can be strategic across days to do this. If you're wanting to hit as many rides as possible, you're wanting to hit maybe all of the coasters throughout a 2 or 3 day stint, then you can hit certain ones when it is the time that it's supposed to be, and then you save other ones for another time when they're going to be a little bit less popular. If you didn't hit Magnum in the morning on the very first day, then you save it for the next day to hit Magnum that next day so that you can then spend your time going to see some shows or having a good meal or even going back to the hotel and relaxing a little bit if you would like to do those things instead. That way it just helps you prioritize your day just a little bit more. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you guys think of this tier list? Is this something that you agree with? Or do you fully disagree with my picks here on this tier list? Dissenting opinions are absolutely respected and perfectly fine in this channel, if you are respectful about it. So show your respect, but also respectfully disagree all you would like to. I'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching today. Sorry, I didn't actually get my shirt fully unbuttoned. It's like you're not even on my channel anymore. Dang it. Press that like button, press the subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. And like I said, go check out memberships if you guys would like to. If you think that would be helpful to you, I'd love to have you guys down there also. And let's go.
Hey, thanks for watching. I release theme park related videos at least a couple times a week, so press that subscribe button if you made it this far. Also, check out similar videos in the playlist to the right or find my newest video to the left. Thanks again, and let's go!